back to Film on High Reviews. Today we're going to be talking about The Wild Bunch, a 1969 Western directed by Sam Peckinpah. This is a film that doesn't really need too much introduction. It's one of the most notorious Westerns of all time, and I'd always meant to see it, but I'd never really got around to doing it until now, and I can say, yeah, it's earned its reputation. It's pretty damn amazing.
Oh my god, it is such an epic. It's a delight to see a movie like this, especially in this day and age with everything that goes on to the movie and the idea of
it feels so raw.
Yeah,
and,
it just feels real. Like it feels like a lens through that time of how hard it was for those people.
Yeah, well, the movie is the story of. It takes place in 1911 when the age of the gunslinger in the Old West is really coming to an end, and it's being replaced by, business and corporations and those kind of things, and there just isn't any use for these kind of men in the world anymore. So we follow, a group of guys, the titular Wild Bunch. There's Pike, Dutch, Lyle and Tector Gorch, Angel, and they also have another guy named Sykes. Freddie Sykes. He doesn't really take part in their robberies because, now he's old, but he used to be apparently like a really badass guy, and they still keep him around because they're sentimental. And yeah, they're just trying to survive any way they can. The movie starts with them pulling a robbery at a railroad office, but unfortunately, there's a group of bounty hunters who have been hired to stop them. The robbery's a setup, and it leads to a pretty amazingly chaotic shootout where a lot of innocent people get killed. And this is one of the interesting points of the movie. Unlike a lot of Westerns, this movie defies a lot of, the customs of Westerns at the time, because, at the time you had, like, the spaghetti Westerns with Clint Eastwood, and, the John Wayne era was kind of coming to an end, and those kind of Westerns, and this film takes place, like I said, in 1911. You see characters using, like, automatic pistols. There's no, like, quick-draw showdowns or any of that nonsense. It's just a really brutal, straightforward look of these guys trying to live, and it's amazing.
Like in the beginning, when they are robbing the place, there's this one dude who's part of their gang at first, and he's basically holding 3 people hostage, and he's acting like a freaking creep.
Absolute psycho, yeah.
And pretty much as they have the shootout, there's a carnival going on, and there's a big shootout.
Well, it's a parade, temperance parade.
So those guys escape, and that guy stays behind. And he's still acting like a creep, and those bounty hunters come in with the sheriff.
He murders the 3 hostages for basically no reason. Then the bounty hunters show up and kill him. And it's because later on in the film, like, the old guy Sykes says, hey, what about my, I sent that guy with you. He was my daughter's boy. How did he do? And, like, he's afraid to kind of say, oh, yeah, he did fine. He doesn't want to admit that the guy was just kind of a total loose cannon psycho. But it kind of drives home how, like, disposable these guys are, and just, like, how fragile loyalty is. Like, loyalty is one of the biggest themes in the film. There's another character named Deke Thornton, who he used to run with Pike, the leader of the gang, and unfortunately they were together in a brothel, and Deke was telling him, we should leave, but Pike wasn't hearing it. The lawmen busted in, Pike got away, but he got shot and captured. And now, as a condition for staying out of jail, he has to hunt his former partners. And he has a really kind of interesting dilemma in the film because he still feels loyal to these guys. I think at his core, he's still a gunslinger. He still wants to be in there, like, robbing and doing his thing, but now he's compromised. He has to ride with these bounty hunters that he really doesn't respect and try to bring in, like, the guys that he used to ride with. And
like pretty much put them like at an end. And very much it's interesting to see this because throughout the whole movie, Deke is more of like a background character. You kind of see
he's just kind of shadowing them and following them, and never quite catching up.
He's very much like the reaction character versus the gang who's like doing a lot
involved
of
in all of these heists and stuff. After the robbery goes south, they end up escaping to Mexico, and then because they basically don't have many other options, they start doing business with this kind of really shady, corrupt Mexican general who a group of rebels are fighting to take down, and that puts one of the gang members, Angel, at odds because he feels sympathetic to the Mexican rebels who are fighting oppression, but they're working for this guy, so it puts him at a conflict. And that kind of is what sets up like the ending of the film and how everything goes down. And It's not a pretty ending, like, and it couldn't have ended in a pretty way. Like, just the
Yeah,
themes of the film and what it's about, the ending of the gunslinger age, like, it needed to end in kind of a bleak finale. It needed to be heavy.
blaze guns of glory type of thing,
Definitely.
And
And amazingly amazing shootouts, amazing editing. Like, I was watching this and I'm like, damn, I can't believe this was 1969. Like, it's so much more intense and so much more vivid than the stuff we get today.
yeah, like when you get to see people die in this movie, it's by droves. So many
Yeah.
people die. So
People are gunned
many.
down with machine guns, innocent people, like, people are used as human shields, women are shot. Like, this is a film that really just, it was really intent on showing the chaos of violence, and, there's no one is spared. It's
No
brutal.
one. No one.
And that's kind of one of the interesting things about the main characters, who are really kind of anti-heroes. They're not good people. Like, they kill and they steal and they don't really care, but at the same time there's kind of a likability to them, and you find yourself rooting for them in spite of that.
Yeah.
Because they're in a world that's just so corrupt. The government's corrupt, the railroad's corrupt, the bounty hunters, the general.
Like you almost want to say that the hero would be Deke, but because he used to run with the gang, he's also compromised.
Exactly. You could kind of see Deke as kind of the heroic figure, but at the same time, like, yeah, he's, he again, Deke's conflict is very much like Pike's. He's just a guy struggling to move on and find a place, and the world really doesn't have a place for these guys, which kind of makes it an interesting, like, it's interesting that the movie we watched last week was Rurouni Kenshin, which kind of explores a lot of similar themes, with the samurai and the men trying to move on and find a new place in the world. And this film is very much about that as well, just coming from the Western, the American Western perspective.
And honestly, this is a 2 hour and 24-minute movie, but
It doesn't feel like it.
exactly.
Yeah.
It feels basically like an adventure because when you start the movie, it starts out with the robbery with Brent Wong, and they have to travel to Mexico, and then they get involved in so many things, and it just feels natural when you're watching it.
Yeah, it
doesn't
moves
feel
fast.
forced.
There's really great pacing. Like,
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of movies that couldn't really replicate the energy that this movie has, and it's just because that's what Peckinpah brought to the genre. Like, this was his breakout film. He made a couple of other movies before this, but this was the movie that really got people's attention. And he was a controversial director. He's known for other movies like Straw Dogs and Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia and stuff like that. He made some pretty intense and uncompromising movies, and this is where it all began. Like, this was a real game changer in terms of American cinema. Like, people were not accustomed to this. Like, when this movie came out, seeing people get repeatedly shot and, like, the slow-mo and just the chaos of it all was so new,
I could see why. Like even watching it today, it's like wow.
Yeah, it still has an impact. The violence in this movie is still quite shocking for a film that's probably close to 50 years old at this point. It's amazing. The actors all did great jobs. William Holden as Pike, great presence, really gives that authoritarian kind of boss, but at the same time, he has that kind of aging gunslinger thing. Like, he played the role beautifully. Ernest Borgnine as Dutch, his kind of best friend.
Mhm.
The loyalty between those guys is kind of the heart of the film.
Pretty much. Honestly, yeah, loyalty is what it really comes down to, because even if their age is dying, they're still loyal to each other, and
Yeah, like Pike has a great line where he's like, you take up with a man, you got to stick with him. If you can't do that, you're no better than an animal. And he kind of contradicts that a few times. Like, he's left people behind, he left Deke behind, and you can tell that kind of, that's nagging at him. Like, he's struggling to uphold his own code in this world that ultimately has no use for that code or no use for that way.
It's basically his past haunting him because of the mistakes that he's done.
Yeah.
Like, the literal mistake of leaving Deke behind got him now to be running all the time throughout this movie. Like,
yeah, just being chased.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Like, Deke is always like maybe.
But at the same time, he understands Deke, because there's a great there's a scene where Dutch is angry at Deke for turning against them, but at the same time, like, Pike understands him. He's like, he gave his word, and he's like, yeah, but it's not about who you give it's not about your word, it's about who you give it to. That's what Dutch says to him, and that's a great scene. So many great moments, small acting moments.
Yeah.
Ben Johnson and Warren Oates, who play the other two members of the gang, the Lyle and Tector, the brothers, they did a great job. They're kind of more like, at first they're kind of more like dicks. They're constantly opposing Pike's leadership and stuff, but in the end they come out pretty strong. You know, they're loyal, and because they know what else is there for us. Like there's a great moment near the end where they basically know this is it. You know, like they're gonna go and head in there, and they're gonna raise hell, and they know there's a good chance they're not gonna come back, and they just walk right in, and it's shot so well, just following them. Like again, like the movie takes its time, but the pacing is so good. The build up to everything is so good. It's wonderful.
Honestly, one other thing that's really good about this movie is the scenery with the locations.
Agreed. Great locations. Looks
Like it brings you back to that old time of what it would be like to ride horses in the vast wastelands like that.
The deserts and the railroads. I love where the final shootout takes place, like that huge kind of Mexican palais. Oh god, like what a great place to have a final battle. Like so many possibilities, and they exploit them all, and it's wonderfully done.
And you get to see pretty much whenever there's a shootout, you get to see where everybody is, what's their location, and where they're shooting from, so that when you see someone getting shot, you're like, oh, okay, I remember this person. And there are times where you'll see maybe one person get shot, and then we cut to somebody else getting shoot or something like that. Then we get back to that person who's starting to fall off a beam or something like that.
Yeah, it's true. They do that a lot where you see a person get shot or fall, and the camera will cut back to them several times in the action.
Yeah.
Like it's a great way of kind of stretching things out, and again driving home kind of how fucking deadly and brutal this violence is. It's like one flaw I could potentially mention in the film. Some of the editing was a little bit wonky, especially where the flashbacks were concerned.
Okay,
like there were some awkward flashbacks, like the flashbacks that shows what happened to Deke and stuff. Those could have been handled a little better. It feels like they kind of, we need to show this and get it out of the way to establish what's going on here, and then move on to the rest of the action. But that's a minor flaw, and it doesn't really ruin the movie. It's a small thing.
Yeah, honestly, it's a small thing. There's one thing that wasn't really solved, I find, personally, was... Okay, so there's... In the middle of the movie, they are tasked to basically get 16 crates of ammo and guns.
Yeah, for the Mexican general, they're going to rob the American military and steal a bunch of guns for them.
So they rob them, and then the American military is like, okay, well, we're going to go after them. So now we get a three-way chase. And Pike is in the lead. They blow up the bridge, but in the middle of the combat, the Deke's...
The bounty hunters, they shoot at the Americans,
They shoot at the Americans. One of them gets shot and killed, and they're all like scouts, or they're pretty much kids.
Yeah.
And now we've got the army going after Deke's people and Deke going after Pike's people, but you never get a resolve.
The thing with the army's never really resolved, but I think they mainly put that in the movie just to kind of make it so that Deke couldn't go back. Like, now they've shot at the American army, like they can't go back to America because now they're going to be killed. Like almost by that point the bounty doesn't even matter. Like that's why at the end you see Deke just kind of sitting there because he knows it doesn't matter anymore. He's kind of screwed either way.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, it was just, and again, kind of showing the questionable morality. Like, these guys are bounty hunters and they're going after, the criminals, but they're not good guys. They're just selfish. Like, they're like buzzards, like vultures, picking over the corpses of the dead. The movie kind of goes out of their way to show that these guys are not sympathetic. There aren't really many sympathetic parties in the movie. I guess maybe you could argue the rebels. They're probably the most sympathetic faction, even though you don't see much of them. Yeah.
Like, you don't really see exactly... Okay, they want to overthrow the general, and the general already kind of knew... Okay, so after they rob it, they keep one crate so that they can give it to the rebels.
Yeah.
And then the general kind of automatically figures out...
Yeah, the general knew because there's a thing where Angel, the Mexican character, he's kind of younger than the other guys and a bit of a loose cannon. Mm. But yeah, they go to Mexico to meet, and one of his ex-girlfriends is hooked up with the general, and she basically just laughs in his face and makes a big show to try and make him jealous, and he freaks out and he shoots her dead right there. So that very nearly leads to open war right there. Pike has to kind of pacify the situation. And yeah, I think because of that kind of led to things going sour, and later on the general says that the mother of the girl he killed is the one that told him that he gave the guns. So it's almost like a karma thing, he killed this chick and now, but yeah, that leads to kind of the ultimate downfall of all these characters. But even then there's almost a sense of I won't say I don't know exactly what you'd describe it. Like, it feels kind of right. You know, it feels
Yeah.
like this is the right thing for these guys to do. Like, it's just, you know, they have to stay true to themselves, and they have to, you know, this is the only way for them. There's no other way to go. There's nowhere else to go. You know, they can't go back to America. You know, Mexico has become too bad for them. There's too much shit happening, and this is it. We need to face down. And it's like, you know, it's there's a certain bravery to that, you know, just marching in the face of doom and going, yep, this is it, but this is how it has to go down, and we're going to stick together. Like, you know, that's the spirit of the Old West.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And with the loyalty of them coming back for Angel and saying, like, okay, we could leave Angel and just take the gold that we got, and that's it, that's all. But even Dutch, he was never really against Angel, but he always kind of looked at the situation like, okay, this guy's a loose cannon. We gotta be careful with this guy. But now with this whole rebellion, and now this guy's gonna get tortured, and then they get to see him being tortured.
Yeah.
They all decide, you know what? Like, basically, this is the point where no, there's nowhere else to run.
Yeah, we can't take anymore. Yeah, there's a scene where you see them, like, you know, they try to kind of ignore it. They're hanging out with, like, the prostitutes and stuff, but they can't do it. Like, you know, you can tell that it's tearing them up, and, like, fuck it, this is what we have to do.
I love that scene because during that scene, Pike is looking at one of the
one of the girls. Yeah, he's just sitting there. But he can't get in the mood, you know.
He can't get into the mood, and he's super silent during the entire scene. And then he ends the scene where it's maybe like a minute or two with "Let's go."
Yeah, let's go, and everybody knows. Yeah.
And then the other guy just looks at him and says, "Why not?"
Yeah, why not?
That's basically it. And then they just walk. There's no riding. There's no riding of horses into the army because they're already in there.
Yeah, they just march right up, and that's it. Yeah, and the final shootout is just glorious. Like, it's so over the top and violent. Like, it gets to a point where, like, everybody's being shot, and you just feel like the all-out chaos of it. You're like, fuck it, who cares? Like, it almost feels like pure nihilism at that point. Like, it doesn't matter who gets shot, men, women, whatever. We're just in it, you know? Like, it's like, Sam Peckinpah did such a great job at conveying that. Like, you know, you don't see that in many movies where everything just goes all-out frenzy and it captures the real chaos.
Like, I want to say Heat kind of hits a little bit on that with its final shootout, with, like, when they're on the, you know, on the road there.
Yeah, when the bank robbery shootout. Like, yeah, Heat has a really good shootout, but it feels too technical. It feels too clean. Like, that's the problem with Heat. Like, this feels, like, dirty and raw, and, like, people are dying. Like, you know, like, just, I don't know if you could shoot a scene like that today, because, like, you know, safety concerns and horses and all this crazy shit going on. Like, you know, I'm like, it reflects kind of the Wild West spirit of the film, just this incredibly chaotic energy that flows, and it's great.
And especially the way they used the squibs and the blood whenever people got shot in the movie. Yeah, there was slow-mo in the movie, but it really punctuated, like,
exactly. The slow-mo, you used the perfect word. The slow-mo was used to punctuate the violence instead of just like, oh, look at this, like, you know, the kind of slow-mo wank that the Matrix brought in. Like, this is how slow-mo should be used in action scenes.
Pretty much.
It's kind of, like, I feel like John Woo must have been a big fan of this movie because you can see a lot of that kind of in his style. But yeah, like, you could almost call Peckinpah, like, maybe not the father of modern day action, but definitely one of them. Like, you know, this rewrote the book as far as, like, action in movies.
Yeah.
So you got to give him his respect.
So, well, that's it for me for it. So I'm gonna give my rating. Honestly, I give this a 4.5 out of 5.
Same here. I was thinking the same thing. 4.5 out of 5 for me. Near perfect, minor flaws, excellent film, genre defining. Go see it. Or rent it, or whatever. Stream it, find it, watch it.
Later.